Between 1845 and 1924, Melbourne Jail housed and slaughtered some of Australia's most notorious criminals, including the outlaw Ned Kelly and a serial killer believed by some to have been Jack the Ripper. Upon the death of these criminals, their heads were immediately shaved and greased. Plaster was applied to create a cast, a mould to create a 3D death mask of the offender. While the 19th century public flocked to museums to view these morbid and strange curiosities of the freshly executed, many of these criminals became unwitting contributors to a widespread belief of a Victorian pseudoscience, a precursor to modern neuropsychology. Doctors became increasingly interested in examining the skulls of convicts, measuring their contours in search of clues to criminals' behaviour. There was a hope that, one day, understanding these physical markers could serve as an early warning system, helping society identify potential violent offenders before they acted. Through the blending of science, justice, and entertainment, death masks offered a haunting glimpse into the past, a reminder of how closely the lines of curiosity and fear can intertwine. Welcome to Outback Oddities. If you're fascinated by strange tales and mysteries, you're in the right place. From eerie ghost stories and unsolved mysteries to bizarre events and curious legends, we dive deep into the most intriguing and mysterious tales that Australia has to offer. Hit that subscribe button and join us on this journey through the weird and wonderful world of the Australian outback. Don't forget to like and share if you enjoy our content. There's always something odd to discover. In today's episode of Outback Oddities, we're diving into the creepy world of death masks. These fascinating artifacts are more than just lifelike casts of the deceased. They hold a unique place in history, capturing not only the likeness, but sometimes the final moments of famous and infamous figures alike. Join us as we explore the stories behind these haunting relics and their surprising connections to Australia's own past. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more strange tales from Down Under. So settle in and let's get started. What is a death mask? A death mask is a life-size plaster cast of a person's head created from a mold taken immediately after death. Often, several death masks were created for the purpose of public display as well as scientific research. Death masks provide a distinctive perspective on the deceased. Unlike formal portraits, painted or photographed, which show a flat, often idealized version of how someone wants to be remembered, a death mask captures a realistic, three-dimensional likeness showing every detail, flaws included. Death masks were more than just eerie relics of the deceased. They were powerful symbols serving multiple purposes. For the state, these masks represented authority and control. Creating a death mask of a criminal wasn't just about preserving a likeness, it was a clear, tangible sign that justice had triumphed over lawlessness. The death masks of famous people were definitely of interest. However, the most sought-after heads were those of criminals. With a large population of convicts and ex-convicts, and hanging around 80 of them every year, there was no shortage of subjects to choose from. One such person fit the description of both fame and criminal, famed bushranger and outlaw Ned Kelly. Edward Ned Kelly was the first Victorian-born person to be hanged. A well-known bushranger from Melbourne, Victoria, he had captured the public's imagination. Kelly was sentenced to hang for killing police constable Thomas Lonergan in the shootout at Stringybark Creek 2 years prior. Sentenced to death by hanging on October 28, 1880, he was hanged only 2 weeks later on November 11, 1880, at the Old Melbourne Jail at 25 years of age. After the execution, Kelly's body remained hanging for 30 minutes to comply with legal requirements for confirming death. Following this, it was transported to a morgue. Once there, the execution mask was removed, revealing that Kelly's face was intact. He had died with a calm expression, and his eyes remained bright. Maximilian Kreitmeyer, a waxwork owner, shaved Kelly's head and prepared a wax mold to create a death mask. The death mask was made using plaster, and numerous copies were produced, one of which Kreitmeyer exhibited at his wax museum on Bourke Street in Melbourne. The so-called modern technique for crafting a death mask or life mask involves first applying oil or grease to the person's face, followed by a layer of plaster of Paris that is allowed to harden before being removed. During these procedures, the head was cast for analysis by anatomy professors using phrenology and physiognomy. We'll get into those soon. Sometimes the head was shaved first. The skin and head were lightly oiled so the plaster would adhere properly. Plaster was applied to 3 or more sections at a time to create the mold. The inside of the mold was then oiled and plaster was poured into the cavity. Once it dried, the mold was taken apart. Multiple copies were often made and distributed amongst the scientific community or displayed publicly in wax or phrenology museums. As well as being used for scientific purposes, death masks were made to inspire fear in would-be criminals. Imagine the impact of a collection of lifelike heads, each one telling the story of a wrongdoer subdued by the mighty hand of the law. For the curious public, the fascination didn't end with justice. People were drawn to the death masks, almost spellbound, much like they are today in museums. In the 19th century, crime captured the public's imagination just as much as it does now. Take, for example, the case of John Knatchbull, a convict who violently murdered a woman in Sydney in 1844. After his execution, a cast was made of his head, and woodcut prints were sold to the eager public. In Melbourne's waxworks, figures of criminals were staple attractions. While all murderers sparked intrigue, bushrangers, those infamous outlaws from the Australian outback, held a special place in the public's morbid curiosity. Some people even sought out physical mementos from these outlaws. When the body of bushranger Johnny Gilbert lay at the Bennelong police station in 1865, so many visitors snipped locks of his hair that little remained by the time he was buried. Rumours circulated that when the bushranger Morgan was killed by police, doctors had cut off his scrotum, fashioning it into a tobacco pouch. Such stories of collecting body parts might sound gruesome today, but in the colonial era, they were part of a widespread fascination with crime that spanned across all social classes. Even John Buckley Casteau, the governor of Melbourne Jail, is said to have run a small business discreetly selling death masks to those with a taste for the macabre. In the 19th century, death masks not only captured a person's likeness, but also embodied the Victorian belief in physiognomy, the idea that character could be read from facial features and skull shape. This fascination led to the rise of phrenology, a field developed by Franz Joseph Gall, who conducted research in prisons and asylums on the quote-unquote diseased brains of criminals and the mentally ill. Gall believed the brain had distinct areas that governed all human behaviour and a person's overall character, and that skull shape reflected these areas. Phrenology gained popularity in Europe, America, and Australia, appealing to those seeking a merit-based social order. It attracted both the working class and some leaders in colonial Australia, such as prison reformer Alexander Maconochie, the prison reformer appointed superintendent of the Norfolk Island Penal Settlement in 1840. Well connected to British phrenological circles, Maconochie shared his passion for the subject, even giving lectures on phrenology during his voyage to the colony. Phrenology lectures, which began in Sydney and quickly spread to Melbourne, drew large crowds eager to see demonstrations linking head shape to character traits, often using the skulls of criminals as examples. These lectures blended science and entertainment, educating audiences while satisfying their fascination with the grotesque. Although initially seen as a reforming science, phrenology's credibility declined from the 1840s onward, ultimately being viewed as pseudoscience. However, it persisted in popular culture, with practitioners offering services alongside palm readers and fortune tellers by the 1870s. Phrenological charts were made and services were offered for career advice. The death mask of notorious outlaw Ned Kelly, cast by Maximilian Kreitmeyer, attracted significant public interest. A.S. Hamilton, a prominent phrenologist, recognized the commercial potential and sought to examine Kelly's skull to demonstrate his theories, but his request was denied. Despite this, Hamilton seemed to work alongside Kreitmeyer and later published a study in the Melbourne Herald to highlight Kelly's supposedly dangerously overdeveloped traits of combativeness and destructiveness, while lacking qualities such as caution and conscientiousness. Hamilton argued these traits were responsible for Kelly's criminal behavior and warned of the dangers posed by such cranial characteristics. There are few heads amongst the worst that would risk so much for the love of power as is evinced in the head of Kelly from his enormous self-esteem. This self-esteem, combined with large love of approbation combined with hope, would often make him appear bright, dazzling and heroic to those who could not see through the veil which vanity threw around him. The Ned Kelly death mask symbolized the authorities' triumph over the outlaw and sparked considerable public interest. Despite phrenology's decline in scientific credibility, it remained influential in everyday thought. Hamilton's phrenological analysis of Kelly, despite its criticisms, retained an aura of scientific credibility for many readers. One enduring idea from phrenology was the concept of a distinct criminal type of head. This notion was later revived by criminologist Cesare Lombroso, who identified a physical born criminal type among Italian inmates, and was echoed by others thereafter. Such theories continued to influence criminology into the early 20th century, sustaining public fascination with the idea that criminal behavior could be linked to physical traits. So where is Ned Kelly's death mask now? The old Melbourne jail holds a substantial collection of death masks of executed criminals, originally created by Victorian prison authorities. Ned Kelly's death mask can be viewed there during a tour. The New South Wales Justice and Police Museum boasts a significant collection of these masks. Recently, the State Library of Victoria acquired a Ned Kelly death mask. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Outback Oddities. We hope you enjoyed exploring the mysterious world of death masks with us. If you found this topic as fascinating as we did, make sure to give the video a thumbs up and share it with your friends who love a good mystery. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our next deep dive into the strange and unexplained. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the oddities of the Outback.